You have. Bernie Firestone, in short, he was going to come and teach in the labor studies program. When Frank, you might know better than me, but, and Murray Jackson was his friend and would always come and tell people a little bit about him, but he's passed away.
Murray Jackson was at Wayne County Community College, he was president.
I know he was.
That's where I came out of.
So he, thank you for that, yeah. I loved Murray, and he always would come and read a few poems, but he knew Bernie and he'd tell the audience who Bernie was. So the short version, which is very tragic, he was going to come and teach in our labor studies program. And he was retiring from his position as a union leader, director, and which I think, was it the Garment Union, or what was the union? Was it SEIU?
It's amalgamated.
That's what I thought, okay, the amalgamated. And I guess a disgruntled retiree came in angry at him because he was the head of the union and just assassinated him at his desk. And that was like in the spring, and he was supposed to start here in the fall of '91. So in memory of him, back then, we started this program that's carried on over the years. I mean, so many unique and unusual and known labor poets. Phil Levine had been on it a couple of times. We used to do it at Elvin's, for some of you who know the place. I had Ken Kesey come. I don't know why, but he came and was really wonderful. As I tell people, he read a short story, because he writes kids stories. So he read about Flappy the squirrel. And then he went on a diatribe about women who were overweight, and then about Jesus and LSD. And maybe in a different order, but anyway, he almost got chased out of Detroit. I know we went on the radio right after that on DET, and people were calling, "What was that you were saying?" You know, and it's like, oh boy. So we've had him. Jorma Kaukonen has done it early on down at Elvin's. So we've had a number, Jim Daniels, Tom Lux, all kinds of people have done it now over 28 years, but we have a really good one this year. We have, from New York City by way of Detroit originally, and you'll hear about that, we have Lawrence Joseph returning. Actually, Lawrence, you were supposed to be on the 2001 Festival for the Arts that I did. And as you know, that just before that weekend, something tragic happened and planes weren't flying. And I called Jorma and said, "Can you drive up?" Because I'm not going anywhere. So he stayed in Ohio, which I think personally a little more dangerous. But so anyway, Larry was one of our poets, and we still carried on with the program. The festival went on that year, but it was mostly people who could drive or walk here, or whatever, because flights didn't fly for a number. Oh, Andre Kudreski did come in. That's right. I don't know how he did.
I remember.
He did. Yeah, that's right. He somehow got a rare flight, and he was the only one on it. And I fly a lot, and back then I flew, and some of you may have too, and be the only person, like, sit in first class, be the first and only one off, and that kind of thing. For quite a while that carried on. So he's here now. We got him back. It's only taken 17 years, but we finally got him to come and read for us, the Detroit Writers Guild. And then we're going to be joined by Daniel Wolf and Chris Vuhalis, the great book, award-winning book on Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan, and the 1913 Massacre, which is, there's some back there. And we're going to hear a little bit from Chris Vuhalis as well. But we're going to start right now with a guy who really, I think, has invigorated our labor studies program here at Wayne State, and just as he got it to its peak, he retired. But he's come back, so that's good. He's looking like, who are you talking about? He really has brought it alive, and believe it or not, labor studies, which now goes by the name of Employment and Labor Relations, who are part sponsors of this, along with our AAUP union, the Detroit Writers Guild, Poets and Writers, the Detroit Public Library. Book Beat is back there, so do buy books. That's an independent bookstore there. Even if you have all those books, buy them again. And have them sign them to your friends, which is something I'm gonna do, and hope to grab some before you guys do. We're gonna start with the person I'm talking about. He's a musician. He is a scholar of labor history. And he now teaches and was directing the program in our labor studies program, now employment and labor relations. And his wife is a great poet, and she is currently the chair of the English department at Wayne State. I teach in the English department. I thought it's probably good to have my chair come, although she's been a friend. She's been a friend longer than a chair, so I don't kind of see her that way. But I respect it. I do. The two of them, now I do. Yeah. The two of them formed a project that was kind of poetry, with Carolyn doing the words and Frankie doing the music, called Black Hat. And they played around a long time, and because he's part of the program and they have some relevant songs, I asked him to come up and do a few songs, a couple songs for us here at the beginning. So please welcome Frankie the K and Carolyn Moore. A man who's been waiting 17 years to read here in Detroit. We used to actually have the Lit Fest. If you were able to come, it was on the lawn here of the library. Lawrence Joseph is a poet, a professor, and a lawyer in that order. He is from Detroit. His poems will resonate with you. He's been in New York City since the 80s, practicing law and then teaching at St. John's University Law School. He has a number of books, which I'm very happy they have quite a few of his titles back there, so you should buy them to support Book Beat. And even if you have them, buy more, as I said, to help them out, because they're great. And let's see, what else? So Lawrence has been in Detroit for a few days. He visited my creative writing class at Wayne State on Wednesday, did stuff in Ann Arbor Thursday. We both performed over in Windsor last night. And each time has been really great for me, and I'm looking forward to hearing him read here today as well. So please welcome, he's a Guggenheim winner, an NEA winner, he's won everything. He's taken the whole thing, but welcome to the stage, Lawrence Joseph!
Thank you, Emil. I'm really happy to be here in this building, actually, which is been a very important building in my life, this library. From the time I was young, I've spent a lot of time here when I was in high school, and when we lived here, my wife and I, during the 1970s, before we moved to New York. I'm going to read today from my most recent book, So Where Are We? All of my books, my first book of poems was set almost entirely in Detroit. During the Detroit of the 1970s. And then when my wife and I moved to New York, I then began to write about New York and Detroit. I've written about Detroit in all of my books, quite consciously, and I'll be reading, that'll be part of the poems also. In New York, just the title poem, which I'm going to start with, So Where Are We? There's ML alluded to, my wife and I live a block from what was Ground Zero, and we still live in the area from a block from what was Ground Zero. We were very affected by it, and I wrote about it. I wrote about it in my book prior to this, Into It, and then So Where Are We? The book after picks up really where the last book left off, not only with the attacks on the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan, but all my themes really, which have been more or less present from the beginning of my work. So where are we? So where were we? The fiery avalanche headed right at us, falling, flailing bodies in midair, the neighborhood under thick gray powder on every screen. I don't know where you are. I don't know what I'm going to do, I heard a man say. The man who had spoken was myself. What year? Which Southeast Asian war? Smoke from infants' brains on fire from the phosphorus hours after they're killed. Killers reveling in the horror. The more obscene, the better. The point at which 100,000 massacred is just a detail. Acid and credit bubbles about to burst. Too much consciousness of too much at once. A tangle of tenses and parallel thoughts. A series of feelings overlapping a sudden sensation felt and known. Those chains of small facts repeated endlessly in the depths of silent time. So where are we? My ear turns like an animal's. I listen. Like it or not, a digital you is out there. Half of that city's buildings aren't there. Who was there when something was, and a witness to it? The rich boy general conducts the Pakistani heroin trade on a satellite phone from his cave. On the top floor of the Federal Reserve, in an office looking out onto Liberty, at the South Tower's one-time space, the Secretary of the Treasury concedes they got killed in terms of perceptions. 10 blocks away, the Church of the Transfiguration. In the back, a Byzantine Madonna. There's a God who fits the drama in a very particular sense. What you said, the memory of a remembered memory, the color of a memory, violet and black. The lunar eclipse on the winter solstice, the moon a red and black and copper hue. The streets, the harbor, the light, the sky, the blue and cloudless, intense and blue morning sky. In a post-bubble credit collapse environment. Now, this is a poem set entirely in downtown Manhattan. No clouds now nearer to Brooklyn Bridge than the bridges to the Heights. Half a block east, barefoot on shards of glass, a towel wrapped around his waist, shaving cream on the left side of his face. A block south, beside a fire hydrant, a leg found severed at the knee. Internal or external, what difference does it make? I shake the snow from my coat, take off my gloves, set them on the counter. I step back onto Spring Street and on Greenwich, start downtown. Sight and sound reconfigured, details, truths, colors, and shapes round out the aesthetic. Things changed and unchanged, not just in abstract ways. This young man, yellow pants, undershirt, stands eating from a garbage bin, patches of ice on the East River Esplanade. One World Trade Center structural steel has reached the 52nd of 104 stories. The light in a pink and a coral, moving through pink and violet, scumbled over pink, turning red on violet. That was yesterday's twilight, this afternoon white and gray and hot. Is everything between 6 banks and everything else connected? Does the old money ultimately determine the new? It's really, really tight out there. How can you not think about it, is her answer, while seated on the sidewalk at the corner of Wall and Broad across from the illuminated stock exchange, with backpack and smartphone, mineral water, sleeping bag, bananas, figs, police vans parked on Nassau, helicopters circling overhead, her presence digitally monitored. In a post-bubble credit collapse environment, 350% interest rates on payday loans and the multi-trillion-dollar market in credit default swaps or history. Submoron, the assistant district attorney, bursts into laughter, drops his coin into the payphone, then goes and orders retaliation from the tombs. Sunday's forecast, the high tide to coincide with Irene's heavy rains and hurricane-force winds. Sea level to rise 4-5 feet at the Battery. This is a poem entitled "Here in a State of Tectonic Tension," and during the early part of this century, as you all know, Detroit was suddenly in the world news again, and constantly in the world news. People were discovering the fact that Detroit was important to the world and that its state had transformed, or was in the part of transforming. And I've been living in and writing about and thinking and feeling about Detroit my entire life, and I decided I'd weigh in on all of this, and I didn't comment on what I thought was going on in Detroit. Here in a state of tectonic tension. Its geography similar to Istanbul's. Read for Lake Huron, the Black Sea, for the St. Clair River, the Bosphorus, for Lake St. Clair, the Sea of Marmara, for the Detroit River, the Dardanelles, and for Lake Erie, the Mediterranean. A natural place for Ford and Olds to open factories, strategically near the Pittsburgh steel mills, Akron rubber plants, Mesabi iron ore range. Here, an ultimate concentration is industrial America. Chrysler, Continental, Bud, Hudson, in an area not much larger than 2 square miles, 90 to 100,000 employed on 2 or 3 shifts, the capital of a new planet, the one on wheels. Whacked out, stamped out connecting rods, the steady blown out flare of furnaces, hammer die brought down on anvil die, oil holes drilled and oil grooves cut. Fordism was Gramsci's word to describe mass assembly based on systems of specialized machines operating within organizational domains of vertically integrated conglomerates fed by small and medium-sized units coordinated by methods of marketing exchange. An epical, systemic violence. Anonymous's eyes pop as he laughs and says, "Drake the old coon from his car, kicked him till he shit himself, and then we set the auto on fire. God, Jesus, was it a show." How many summers after that the Motor City burned to the ground? Soon several new regimes of redistributed wealth would alter the way capitalism proceeded. A squad of police breaks down the Union Hall door, swinging crowbars and tossing canisters of mace around the time the Long Depression started. There are stalks of weeds in sunlit snow, an abandoned house surrounded by acres of snow. The decay apparently is frightened the smart money away. Metaphorically underwater, more is owed on properties in Detroit than they're worth. His hands and feet were bound, found beaten in the field near Post and Fort. He's in intensive care at Receiving Hospital, says Sergeant Ali L. Atkins. Investigators yet to ask him who he is or what happened. Notice that on the high school baseball diamond is a herd of goats, attended by whom? Notice a few doors down, the stucco plastered house painted baby blue, walking in front in a red stocking cap, green specks on his shoes. What do you think he's thinking? Drive woodward to 7 Mile. 7 Mile, west on 7 Mile to Hamilton. Hamilton south on the Lodge Freeway, and then the Lodge downtown, and measure the chaos. Drive Mack Avenue east to Seminole, south on Seminole to Charlevoix, then west on Charlevoix to Van Dyke, south on Van Dyke to East Jefferson, and remember what isn't. Ionic pillars carved with grapes and vine leaves no longer there. Deserted houses of gigantic bulk in which it seems incredible anyone could have ever lived, no longer there. Dodge Main's nocturnal gold vapors, no longer there. The constellated bright lights reflected on the Rouge River's surface, no longer there. Narco-capital, techno-compressed, gone viral, spread into a state of tectonic tension and freaky abstractions. It'll scare the fuck out of you is what it'll do, anthropomorphically scaled down by the ferocity of its own obsolescence. Which of an infinity of reasons explain it? Which of an infinity of conflagrations implode its destruction? This is a poem, 9 parts. I'm going to read 9 parts of it called In Parentheses. Try to move this up a little bit. They're small parts. 1. As I said, I'm a lawyer. Technically speaking, is a head blown to pieces by a smart bomb, a beheading? 3. Estimated 1,000 to 2,000 militia, gangs really, of 15 to 3,000 armed killers in separate overlapping networks, difficult to differentiate. And now this, to quote an anonymous State Department source, but no one could have predicted, this phenomenon's the Caliphate's rise. Nothing since the triumph of the Vandals in Rome and North Africa. This sudden, this incomprehensible. 4. In the techno-capital sphere, absolute principles of profit growth, of value accumulation, the absolute freedom to recombine the production of raw materials into virtual information in spaces of time, infotime. 5. A theological political fragment, a mythographical scriptural text, and sorrow. To understand the meaning of sorrow, Saint Sorrow, the addressee of my avowal, Saint Sorrow's stern vigil, necessary to keep. 6. Hyperviolence is the word, of epic proportions, a species thing, point at which violence becomes ontology, these endless ambitious experiments in destruction, a species grief. 7. Quite often, almost daily in fact, I have strong impressions of eternity. My ancestors are there too in the shadows. My mother and my father, grandmothers, grandfathers, whom I refuse to let perish, whispering to me to be careful. 8. What's that about? Someone I heard say that to say that Hispanics are East Asian is sort of like saying that Arabs are white. 9. Hear that? That man's face being stepped on, skull being cracked by the baton stick, head slammed against the concrete edge, blood in his eyes, body limp, in the process now of being handcuffed. 10. I'm speaking of a law now, understand. That point at which bodies locked in cages become ontology. The point at which structures of cruelty, force, war become ontology. The analog is what I believe in, the reconstruction of the phenomenology of perception, not according to a machine, more now for the imagination to affix to than ever before. This is a poem entitled Visions of Labor. It's about labor. And I start with a quote from William Blake, who was quoting from John Milton, his poem on Milton, actually. And then I make reference to Pound's Blake, or Ezra Pound, in one of the Visions of Labor. I will have writings written all over it in human words, wrote Blake. A running form, Pound's Blake, shouting, whirling his arms, his eyes rolling, whirling like flaming cartwheels. Put it this way, in this language, a blow in the small of the back from a rifle butt, the crack of a blackjack on a skull, face beaten to a pulp, punched in the nose with a fist, glasses flying off. Fucking wobbly wop, hit him again for me. Rifle barrels slammed against the knees. So much blood in the eyes, rain and the night, and the shooting pain all up and down the spine. Can't see. Put it this way. In the sense of smell is an acrid odor of scorched metal. In the sense of sound, the roaring of blowtorches. Put it in this language. Labor's value is abstract value, abstracted into space in which a milling machine, cutter, cuts through the hand, the end of her thumb nearly sliced off, metal shavings driven in, rapidly infected. Put it at this point, the point at which capital is most inhumane, unsentimental, out of control. The quantity of human labor in the digital manufacture of a product is progressing toward the economic value of zero. The maintenance and monitoring of new cybernetic processes occupied by fungible, commodified labor in a form of indentured servitude. Static model, dynamic model, alternate contract environments, enterprise size and labor market functions, equilibrium characterization, elasticity of response to productivity shocks. The question in this third industrial revolution is who owns and controls the data. That's what we're looking at. Labor cheap, replaceable, self-replicating, marginal, contracted out into smaller and smaller units. Them, hordes of them, of depleted economic social value who don't count in any situation, in anyone's eyes, and won't count ever, no matter what. The truth that sooner than later, one way or another, they will simply die off. In Hanover Square, a freezing dawn. Inside bronze door, the watchman sips bourbon and black coffee from a paper cup. Sees a drunk or drugged hedge fund boy step over a passed out body. Logic of exploitation, logic of submission, alienation, eyes fixed on mediated screens and semiotic labor flow. How many generations between the age of slavery of these states and ours? Makers we of perfectly contemplated machines. This is a poem also set in Detroit, and it's set in the Detroit in the 1970s. And I wanted this really to supplement the language in my first book, to fill out a language that I didn't use in my first book of that period of time in Detroit. It's entitled In That City, in Those Circles. In that time, in that place, a few cars, a bus on Belle Isle, seen from this side of the river, dark blue, icy river. On the other side of the Belle Isle Bridge, Uniroyal's tires, bright silver smoke blown over the river to Canada. Time-bound, space-bound, a distinctive industrial space. Ford Motor Company dumping station, the oh-so soda pop warehouse, peerless cement, railroad tracks on the bridge to Zug Island, the smell from Wayne's soap enough to make you puke. Ideal bar, icon, Black Madonna, blood red slashed down her right cheek, Pulaski, Copeland, Home, Melville streets, City of Detroit, white wastewater treatment plant, 2 large sludge ponds, 2 slaughterhouses, 1 for pigs, 1 cows. And the Empire News, all ratcheted up, unprecedented, the rise in energy prices, armed forces placed on nuclear alert, plans made to occupy regions of Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi, surpluses deposited in New York banks, so-called petrodollars, recycled in high-interest loans to Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. And not too long after that, really, millions of barrels a day cut off again. British Petroleum declaring force majeure. Major contracts canceled, the Rotterdam spot market soaring, the second oil shock fully underway, Ark of Crisis, the State Department's name of the policy implemented to spread tribal and religious instability in the Near East and Soviet Union's southern republics. Intrinsically curved, the gravitational field, S-curved lines, glue sprayed, vinyl tops stretched and trimmed into place, lead soldiers set in the crack between roof and body. Fury of truth, its enigmas, its blinding illuminations, marked in the margin of Robert Hayden's American Journal, Hayden's Cosmic Ouija, the mathematics of the message. Like that, the music sweet and funky, Detroit music, backbeat and beat, tempos extreme, churchy sometimes, rhymes at ends of and inside the lines. The music made is for love, asleep in each other's arms, where there we are and nothing else matters. There where the sidewalk heaves, strapped by weeds, front door boarded by 2x4s, an address only a 5, the other numbers missing. And the red dog sniffing the rusted motor, picking up a scent. And these Maronite warlords, he says, here from Lebanon, my Armenian friend, long late lunch, Grecian gardens, grilled lamb chops, green beans, roasted potatoes, a bottle of Santali Rapsani. They're trying to force a tax on us in East Beirut to finance their militias. And on the Southampton Street side of Finney High, the white hoods hang out on, black killers, Errol Flynn's surrounded, switchblades, then gunshots, police in riot gear, media coverage, front page headlines, free press and news, and the incarcerated burned with cattle prods, hit and hit again with blackjacks at the 2nd Precinct station. In this air, raw still, 12 years ago, the 24th of July, General Throckmorton's 5,000 paratroopers recently returned from Vietnam, authorized under the Insurrection Act of 1807, M16s, M79 grenade launchers, lines of deployment set up direct to the Pentagon, a state of war declared. In that time, in that city, in those circles, facts of feeling to call out fact. And I'll read 2 more poems. I want to actually read, no, maybe 3 more poems. Well, there's one I want to read, but there's also one that's a little bit shorter, just to give a, it's in 5 very short poems. One, it's called On Peripheries of the Imperial. Eyes of the hurricane, the battery, the Hudson breached, millions of gallons of it north on West Street filling Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, overflowing into the World Trade Center site, East River, 6 to 8 foot wall of water on South Front, Water, John, Fulton, Pearl, Brooklyn Bridge's woven cables lifted delicately into hurricane sky. 2, perhaps I make too much of it. That time, Eldon axle, brake plates dipped in some sort of liquid to protect them from dust, dirt, metal chips. The grinding caused that time, night shift, press machine shop on Outer Drive, rolls of stainless steel put in, fixed up, because the work you do is around fire, your cuticles burn if the mask's not on tight. 3, when the mind is clear to hear the sound of a voice, of voices, shifts in the attitude of syllables pronounced. When the mind is clear to see a Sunday in August, shrine of Our Lady of Consolation, Cary, Ohio. At a holy water font, a mother washes her 6-year-old's fingers crushed in an accident so that they'll heal. 4, So what percentage of Weasel Boy's DNA do you think is pure weasel? Tooth twisted, Yeats's weasels in 1919, fighting in a hole. 5. Conflated the finance vectors, opaque cyber surveillance, supranational cartels, and the corporate state's political economic singularity. The greatest number of children in United States history are now incarcerated, having been sentenced by law. 6. A comic dimension to it on this F train to 169th Street in Queens. Doesn't want to disturb you, but see, he was stabbed in the face with an ice pick. He lost his left eye. Lid pried open with thumb and forefinger. Here, look, he'll show you. A white and pink colored iris. And I'll end with a longer poem, because it ends in a place that all of us recognize, especially in Michigan. It begins in Manhattan, and then it moves around in various time, space. It's called Is What It Is. Fulton near Pearl, dug up to lay the new Fulton Center subway power lines. A stone wall 3 feet high and silt muck 7 feet below street level. Inside it a ceramic bird's half blue, half yellow head, stem of a pipe, chunk of glazed 17th century stoneware decorated with the arms of Amsterdam. Huge turkey vultures taking a liking to the landfill. The preferred source of food for peregrine falcons is pigeons. His own police department, the mayor, breaks, 7th largest army in the world. And remember, too, the United Nations is here, so he has his own State Department, too, an entree into the diplomatic world. It's deep inside the head, this man says. He's permanently disabled. Affectual emotionally, what's happened here. Pulverized glass, concrete, lead, asbestos traces, crap he calls it. Here, he shows you the albuterol and phenaphrine he must at all times carry. To cool your head, you walk. Statue of Confucius on the Bowery, rice bean cakes, chicken feet, curried squid on Division, under the Manhattan Bridge on Canal to Stewart Park, a piece of torn yellow tape tied to a tree, this woman shouting into her smartphone, "Go fuck yourself and die." Large black letters in Russian on the freighter's hull fade imperceptibly into one another. The supply route to deliver food to non-government held areas in Aleppo severed. 300,000 at risk of starvation. Electricity cut off in markets, houses, schools, bombed hospitals. Migrant smuggling worth more now than the trade in drugs and weapons. Profits confined to those in a position to play. Venture capital, private equity, hedge fund operators, stock buybacks leveraged, paid for by money borrowed at artificially low Federal Reserve Bank charged interest rates, newly minted treasury obligations validating private sector asset prices into the trillions. State-sanctioned racketeering is what it is. But after all, I'm a lawyer, so I can never get away from evil. Kafka said. Franz Kafka, legal officer, Workers' Accident Insurance Institute, the Kingdom of Bohemia, whose report, Measures for Preventing Accidents from Wood Planing Machines, among other things, depicts work-related dissevered fingers. Flint is what it is. Knowingly to force the poor to purchase and use toxic water isn't a form of chemical warfare, isn't a form of genocide.
Lawrence Joseph. I'm sure I want the stage set. Were you going to stand?
I'll stand in front without a mic.
Oh,
People
okay.
can hear me.